For Leona Wagner, tonight was supposed to be just another regular work night. By regular, I mean, like so many times before in her life, working as a waitress at another fancy event, smiling, passing out champagne, then quietly heading home. But tonight, fate was going to play a different card. When she stood in front of the massive Adler mansion on the outskirts of Charleston, she momentarily lost her breath. It felt like she had stepped onto a movie set. Huge white columns, neatly trimmed bushes, and a marble driveway. Under the golden light of the evening sun, she whispered to herself, "Just one more job," and straightened her apron. Taking a deep breath, she walked in through the back door. Leona was 24 years old. She had been found in a shelter when she was just 5, with no information about her past, and was adopted by a humble but loving couple. Life had never been easy for her. She had spent her childhood trying to fill the emptiness with hard work and, as an adult, she worked 2 jobs, long shifts, and kept searching for something. Tonight, though, was the night everything would change, though she didn't know it yet. The head butler, Friedrich, a trusted man of Victor Adler, greeted them in the kitchen with a stern look as he listed the rules. No talking to the guests, no eye contact, just do your job. Leona nodded, grabbed the silver tray, and made her way inside. The mansion's grand hall was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, dark wood paneling lined the walls, and dim light filtered in through the windows, giving the place an almost timeless feel. Famous politicians, investors, media moguls. They were all there. Leona moved elegantly between them, carrying her tray. But something felt off. Despite the grandeur of the place, there was an invisible tension in the air, and that tension began to quietly pull her in. At the end of the hall, she noticed a narrow hallway, almost hidden from view. The lighting was dimmer, the carpet softer. She moved instinctively. She knew she was breaking the rules, but there was a pull she couldn't explain. Stepping into the hallway felt like stepping into another time. Old oil paintings lined the walls, serious-looking men and elegant women. And then, a photo. A small, black-framed, black-and-white picture. Leona almost dropped the tray in her hands. Her heart began to race uncontrollably. The little girl in the photo, it was her. This couldn't be real. Her curly hair was falling over her cheeks, smiling with her teddy bear in hand. The look in her eyes was the same as the one she saw in the mirror every morning. The little scar above her eyebrow, a childhood memory she could never forget. Every detail pointed to one undeniable truth. This photo had been hers as a child. But how could that be? What was her childhood photo doing here, in this mansion of a millionaire, a place she was visiting for the first time? When she heard footsteps, she quickly stepped back from the hallway, shaken. Her heart was still racing as she found herself back in the hall. She smiled, adjusted her tray, and continued working. But her mind was elsewhere. The guests were now just silhouettes. The music was nothing but a hum. All she could think about was that photo. The fact that it was there meant her past was somehow connected to this house. And that connection was opening the door to questions she had never been able to answer. That night, when Leona finished her shift and went home, she spent the entire night awake. There was a dark gap between what her adoptive family had told her about when they found her and the photo. Her mother Nora's words echoed in her mind. "You were so little when we found you. There was very little information about your past." But why so little? Had she really just ended up without a family by accident? Or was this mansion the place where her past had been deliberately erased? And at that moment, Leona made a decision. She wouldn't let this story go. The next morning, Leona's eyelids were heavy, but her mind was wide awake. She forced herself out of bed, but her thoughts were still stuck in that hallway, on the photo on the wall. As the sound of the coffee machine filled the kitchen, her mom, Nora, was reading the newspaper, and her dad, Martin, was looking out the window. While Leona added cream to her cup, she casually asked, as if it were a random question, "Mom, when I was adopted, was I in a shelter?" Nora looked up. Her eyes froze for a brief moment. "Yes, you were 5. Did something remind you of it?" Leona looked away. "I was just wondering. Did they tell you anything about my family back then?" Martin sighed, and Nora swallowed. "They just mentioned an accident. They said you lost your family, a car accident." The same words, the same night. All the clues pointed in the same direction. But the answers were missing. How could a photo of her past be in such a big house, with no explanation? That night, When Leona was called back to work, she didn't hesitate. She put on her uniform, tied up her hair, and once again found herself in the grand, yet dark mansion. But this time, she had more than just drinks on her tray. She had a purpose: to reclaim her past, to see that photo again, maybe find another clue. As she moved among the guests, her eyes kept drifting to that hallway. With each pass, her heart raced a little faster, her feet trembling. Finally, when she saw an opening, she slipped into the same quiet hallway. But the wall was empty. The photo was gone. Not even the frame was there. It was like it had never existed. A cold shiver ran through her veins. Someone must have noticed what she had seen, and someone had decided that photo should no longer be there. Was this discovery a threat, or was it a clue to her past? She swallowed, studied the wall, examined every detail. But there was nothing but emptiness. A deep fear settled in Leona, and her eyes quickly scanned the surroundings. At that moment, a pair of eyes seemed to be watching her from a distant corner. Or maybe it was just how she felt. She turned immediately and went to the kitchen. She finished her remaining shift in silence. But that night, as she left, she carried not just questions, but a sense of determination. If that photo had really been there, it was proof of something about her life. And if someone had taken it down, there was something being hidden. Maybe not just her past, but still a living threat in those mansion walls. The next morning, while having breakfast with her mom, Leona couldn't hold it in. "Mom, when I was taken from the shelter, was there no paperwork about my identity? No traces found." Nora went quiet. As she held her coffee, her lips slightly trembled. "Only your name was written, Leona, and your birth date. But there was no last name. Social services told us your mother had died, and your father had passed in an accident. That was all." Leona's heart felt like it was about to leap out of her chest. The accident? Which year was it? Nora thought for a moment. 2005? I think it was in the spring. Leona's mind began to throb. That date matched some names she had seen on the portraits in the mansion, especially one, Andrew Adler, Victor's brother, and his wife, Helena. Both had died in a car crash that same year, according to old family notes. But there was no mention of the little girl who had vanished along with them. Not until Leona had seen that photo. That night, Leona dove deep into the internet. She scoured old news archives. She found only one short article about the crash that happened in the spring of 2005. Victor Adler took over family leadership after his brother's tragic accident. No names, no mention of a child. It was as if everything had been erased. Deliberately. But one person might know everything. Leona, on her next shift, spotted an elderly, calm-faced security guard standing in the back of the kitchen. His name was Marcus. From his posture, it was clear he had worked there for years. Maybe he, too, had been forced to forget the truth. Leona quietly approached him. "Mr. Marcus, have you worked here for a long time?" He nodded. 23 years. Leona took a deep breath. Victor's brother, Andrew. Did he really die in an accident? Marcus's gaze suddenly sharpened. His eyes darted around. Then he leaned in quietly. "That's what everyone says. But that accident, it was strange. And there was a little girl. She went missing. No one talks about her anymore." Leona's throat tightened. "What happened after that?" Marcus shrugged, but his voice lowered. "Victor took over everything very quickly. Too quickly. And anyone who tried to ask questions either resigned or was silenced." That night, as Leona walked out of the mansion, it wasn't just the ghosts of her past that walked with her, but the weight of a secret. Leona couldn't shake Marcus's words from her mind. What was happening in the mansion had become not just a part of her past, but of her present as well. If that little girl, the child in the photo, was really her, something she believed more and more each day, then everything she had believed about her life had been built on false foundations. Knowing she was adopted was one thing, but being lied to about the existence, death, and even the absence of her family was something entirely different. This wasn't just a personal history issue. It was a deliberate erasure, a theft. By the weekend, Leona got in touch with an old employee through social services, an elderly woman who had worked as a maid at the Adler Mansion years ago. The woman's name was Elizabeth Kramer, and she lived in a small town outside Charleston. Leona set up the meeting. Her heart raced as she knocked on the door of a modest red brick house, a few hours outside the city. The elderly woman who answered the door had a look in her eyes that seemed unfamiliar, yet somehow familiar. "You, are you little Leona?" she said in a soft voice. Leona, stunned, nodded. Elizabeth invited her in. I know you. You were 5. You used to wear your yellow dress inside out, but your mom never fixed it. Helena used to say, let the child be free. Leona's eyes filled with tears. Why don't I remember anything? Elizabeth took a deep breath and sat on the couch. Because you were made to forget. Leona stayed silent, just listening. Elizabeth began speaking, as if these were words she had been forced to hold back for years, finally wanting to release them. When the accident happened, you were in the car too. But your seatbelt came undone, and you slipped under the back seat. When the police came, they couldn't find you. They either thought you were dead or that you had been kidnapped. But when Victor took over, the files disappeared. The police stayed silent. I saw you being erased. That's why I resigned. Leona buried her head in her hands. So, I'm Andrew and Helena Adler's daughter. Elizabeth smiled faintly. You were their greatest joy. They used to call you Leo. You'd run around the garden, picking rose branches to put in your mother's hair. Leona felt like the knot inside her was finally starting to unravel. But something was still unclear. So then, why don't I remember anything? Elizabeth lowered her head. That accident, it may have left not just physical scars, but mental ones too. Maybe you suppressed it. Maybe the people who found you didn't want you to remember. Who? Leona whispered, her voice barely audible. Elizabeth looked away. I don't know, but I'm sure Victor didn't search for you. Maybe he found you. Maybe he wanted you to disappear. As Leona drove home, her hands were trembling. Almost all the pieces were in place now. She had lost her family in an accident. She had survived. But then, her past had been erased. And there was someone who had silenced her, Victor Adler. That night, before going to bed, she pulled out a small notebook from her bag. She wrote one sentence at the top of the page. I'm in the house of the man hiding the truth. Her next move was clear. She would enter Victor's study and find evidence that documented everything. Maybe the papers that erased her past. Maybe a letter about her family. Maybe another photo that would prove the truth. But no matter what, she wouldn't leave empty-handed this time. She would no longer be just Leona's voice. She would be the voice of everyone who had been forced to stay silent in the past. The sky over the Adler mansion was unusually dark that night. It was as if the web of secrets that had been hidden for years had pulled the clouds down with it. Leona slipped in through the service entrance late at night. She was wearing her catering uniform again. But this night, she had no intention of just carrying plates. Her mission was much bigger, much riskier, to secretly enter Victor's private study and find the documents that would prove the truth. A small piece of information circulating among the staff had given Leona the opportunity she was looking for. Victor Adler had gone out of town on a 2-day business trip. Only a few night staff members were left in the house, and no one questioned Leona's presence. She had carefully observed the security cameras and the staff's break times. Now, there was only one thing left: courage. The wooden stairs leading up to the 3rd floor creaked slowly. Her heart felt like it was going to burst from her chest. At the end of a long, dark corridor, a pair of double oak doors stood before her. Victor Adler's sacred space. The room no one dared enter without permission. Leona gently pushed the door. It creaked open. The room was dimly lit, with only the moonlight seeping through the tall windows. A silence hung in the dusty air, as if it were telling the story of years of silence. The room was almost theatrical. A massive desk, bookshelves filled with leather-bound books, heavy curtains, and an antique set of chairs. But Leona's eyes were drawn to the enormous oil painting, an old family portrait of Victor with his father. And right there, just behind the painting, a frame that seemed slightly detached from the wall. Leona carefully pushed it with her fingertips. The painting slowly slid to the side. Behind it was a safe. She took a deep breath. Her fingers tried to recall the date Marcus had told her. Victor never forgot the day his brother died. Leona closed her eyes and typed the numbers. 04092005. A click echoed. The safe opened. Inside were documents, notebooks, an old digital recorder, and letters placed in an elegant brown envelope. Leona quickly stuffed the items into her bag, but when she saw the envelope, her hands started to shake. Written in fine, delicate handwriting were the words, "To my daughter, Evelyn." Her knees buckled, and her heart seemed to stop. She opened the envelope. Grabbing the letter, she began to read, unable to hold back her tears. "My sweet Evelyn, Asterisk, if you're reading this, it means that what we feared has come to pass. Your father and I have been in danger for some time. We tried everything to protect you. But if one day you find this letter, know this, the truth is within you. Never trust Victor. He wanted to destroy not just the inheritance, but you as well. But you are our daughter, Evelyn Wagner Adler. You are the honor of our family. Don't fear facing your past. We have always loved you. Your mother, Helena. Leona, kneeling, pressed the letter to her chest. Evelyn, that was her real name. The truth behind the name, Leona, she had known all her life, had been revealed in the lines of a letter written with her family's love. But before she could even catch her breath, she heard footsteps in the corridor. She quickly shut the safe, pushed the painting back into place, and, with her bag on her shoulder, moved toward the door in the dark. But she was too late. The door opened. Victor Adler was there. His gaze was icy, his voice sharp like a sword. So, you finally decided to find the truth. Leona stood up, but her eyes now held not fear, but anger. I know everything. My mother, my father, you. I'm the past you silenced. Victor laughed mockingly. No one would want to mess with someone like you, Evelyn. You were a mistake, and your father was too weak. I saved this family. You are nothing. Leona tightened her grip on her bag. Then why are you afraid? With these documents, I can prove everything. I will expose not just my past, but you as well. The smile on Victor's face disappeared. You can't do that. You won't even make it out that door. Let's see about that, Leona said, and suddenly started running. The corridor seemed endless. Security calls echoed in the distance. Leona's feet felt heavy as concrete, but her heart carried her forward. She burst through the door and disappeared into the night. When she jumped into her car, her hands were still trembling. But there was something in her eyes now, a determination that had replaced her fear. That night, she met with a journalist, a senior researcher who had been chasing documents about the Adler family for years. And with every document she pulled from her bag, she was not just uncovering her own past, but exposing the dark side of an empire. The news exploded nationwide the next morning. Headlines screamed, Adler scandal. CEO Victor Adler accused of inheriting fraud and covering up family tragedy. Leona, or rather, her real name, Evelyn Wagner Adler, sat in the corner chair of her kitchen, quietly listening to the voice rising from the screens. Her hands still carried the echoes of a date written the night before. Her mother's letter, the documents presented to the court, and the records from the safe had now all been documented. She had not only revealed her own past, but also exposed the lies Victor Adler had skillfully built for years. The press had camped outside the mansion's gates. Victor's lawyers were making shaky statements in front of cameras, but everyone knew the truth. The Adler name was now associated not only with wealth, but with a history buried in betrayal. That once perfect mansion was, in reality, a tomb, place where truths were buried and lives were silenced. But the story wasn't over yet. A week later, a flash image was broadcasted on a national news channel. A woman was being escorted out of a luxurious but isolated private clinic outside of Nashville. Gray shadows fell across her white hair, the weight of the years she had lived. Her eyes were distant, but for a moment, she looked directly at the camera, and Leona recognized those eyes. Her mother, Helena Adler, was alive. Victor had kept her out of sight for years, dismissing her with a fake death report. But Leona's courage had allowed the truth to rise from where it had been buried. In that moment, no TV recording, no photo, could truly capture the reality of it. Because when Leona stepped into the clinic, she was looking into her mother's eyes for the first time in years. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling. The woman turned. There was a vacancy in her eyes. But for a second, that emptiness filled. Evelyn. When the two women embraced, time stood still. Doctors said that Helena had suffered from trauma-induced amnesia, having not remembered for years. But Leona's voice, the letter, and pieces of the past had slowly brought her back to the present. Now, it was time to start again with her mother. During the court days, Leona testified. She didn't just talk about the lies Victor had told. She also exposed how a silent society, a power-worshipping system, could erase a child's life. Victor was convicted of inheritance fraud, hiding information, and violating human rights. But Leona didn't want the mansion, the wealth, or the Adler name. She carried her own name. She chose her own path. She and her mother moved to a small town in Vermont. There, they opened a center together, a place of hope for children who had been lost in the system, adopted, and silenced. Evelyn's house, for children growing up with truth. Leona was no longer just a girl following the traces of her past. She was a woman writing her own story, with her real name, her real voice, and her own shout. Every morning, as she watched the sunrise with her mother, she'd take a sip from her cup and whisper to herself, "I am free now." If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. We'll be waiting for you with a new story every time. You can also support us by joining our channel and gain access to more exclusive content. Make sure to share your thoughts with us in the comments. We truly value hearing your feedback.